All right, so buckle up, because today we are diving deep into all things Iron Man. But, and here's the twist, we're not just looking at the suit, the tech, the Avengers. We are going deeper, like way deeper. Today, we're unpacking the man behind the mask, Tony Stark.
And it's wild how much the source material you sent, all those excerpts from the Marvel Fandom Wiki, how much it digs into like the psychology of this whole billionaire playboy genius thing Tony's got going on. It's not just, what are those things called? Repulsor rays and, witty comments, right?
Okay, let's unpack that. So we get to start with Tony's early years. And I've always found it super interesting that he's adopted. Adds a whole other dimension to his story, don't you think?
For sure. And it gets even more intense. The wiki entries, they actually mention that Tony has this secret brother, Arno. Arno's a genius too, but get this. He's genetically engineered by, wait for it, an alien robot.
Hold on. What?
Yeah.
Alien robots are in the Stark family tree now. Okay, things just got real. So was Arno the classic evil twin trope?
Not exactly. It's actually kind of sad. Arno was really sick, and they had to hide him to keep him safe from, get this alien entity named 451. See, Tony being adopted wasn't just family stuff. It was a whole cover story to protect Arno, to throw 451 off their trail. Can you imagine growing up knowing you were basically like a decoy?
No wonder Tony's got trust issues like a mile wide. That kind of secret would mess anyone up.
Exactly. And speaking of complicated relationships, we got to talk about Howard Stark. The guy casts a looming shadow over Tony's life, and not in a good way.
Yeah, Howard Stark, not exactly winning any World's Best Dad awards.
Yeah.
What kind of impact did he actually have on Tony?
Well, from what I gathered in these excerpts, it wasn't pretty. We're talking verbal abuse, constant pressure on Tony to be tough, almost like a machine, always striving for perfection. There's even a part where Howard forces Tony to take his first drink when he was just a kid. Talk about a recipe for disaster.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's rough. It definitely makes Tony's struggles with, alcoholism later on make a lot more sense, doesn't it? Like he's always searching for control because he was robbed of it so young.
It's a pattern, right. And it explains why, even with all the money and brains in the world, Tony still needs validation. He's constantly overcompensating for a childhood where he never felt good enough.
And then you add on top of all that, the whole becoming Iron Man thing, being kidnapped, those terrorists forcing him to build weapons. That's the kind of trauma that stays with you.
Oh, absolutely. And the source material really points to that being this huge turning point in Tony's life. Injured, staring death in the face, he's basically told, build us a weapon or die. Talk about pressure.
Classic hero origin story setup, right?
Yeah.
But this being Tony Stark, he's not just going to cobble together a bomb and call it a day.
Exactly. He doesn't just build a weapon, he creates an escape. Working with Professor Ho Yinsen, who was also a prisoner, they build the very first Iron Man suit. It was a technological marvel, and it saved Tony's life. Sadly, Yinsen, he didn't make it. He sacrificed himself to give Tony time to escape. Talk about a defining moment.
So now you've got this near-death experience, the guilt of losing Yinsen, and the realization of just what his tech can do. That's got to do something to a person, don't you think?
It seems like that's when Tony's need for control, it goes into overdrive. You know what I mean? He becomes obsessed with this Iron Man suit, always upgrading, adding more power, better defenses. He's trying to protect himself, physically, but I think emotionally too. The world just got a whole lot scarier.
And that need for control, we see it in his personal life too, right? All the secrecy, the walls he puts up in relationships.
Totally. It's like he wants to connect with people, but he's terrified of letting anyone in, so he pushes them away. And nowhere is that more obvious than in his stance on, remember this, the Superhuman Registration Act during Civil War.
Yes, Civil War. When Tony went all in on pro-registration, even turning against Captain America. But knowing what we know now about his past, his childhood, it makes his stance a little more understandable, right?
It definitely adds a layer of tragedy. This is a guy who spent his whole life building walls because he doesn't trust the world to keep him safe, and then suddenly he's in a situation where he feels like he has to control the uncontrollable, superpowered people.
Which, knowing Tony, probably ate him up inside.
Oh, for sure. The excerpts talk about how much guilt he feels, how he basically hates himself for what happened during Civil War, and he doubts himself constantly, even with that genius brain of his, always wondering if he made the right call.
Makes you realize, even with all the money and gadgets, Tony Stark, he's still human,
Yeah.
Still vulnerable.
That's what makes him such a great character to explore, right? He's not just a superhero, he's this walking contradiction, fighting his own demons while he tries to save everyone else.
So before we get too deep into the psychology of it all, we got to address the elephant in the room, right?
Yeah.
Extremis. What is it, and how does it play into Tony's story?
Okay, so Extremis is like this biotechnological process, almost like a virus, that basically lets Tony merge with the Iron Man suit.
Get out.
Yeah, it gives him enhanced abilities, healing, he can even control machines with his mind, but it comes at a cost.
Oh, what kind of cost are we talking about here?
Well, for one thing, it's addictive. The excerpts describe it as being like a drug for Tony, this way to push himself even further, but it also makes him reckless, impulsive, almost unstable at times.
So it's like he's trading one form of control for another. Instead of the suit being external, it's a part of him now, blurring the lines between Tony Stark and Iron Man even more.
Exactly. And it's during this whole Extremis period that things go, well, south. Remember the Skrull invasion? When those shape-shifting aliens infiltrated Earth?
Vaguely, yeah.
Yeah.
Refresh my memory.
Okay, so Tony's armor, it got infected with this Skrull virus, and it had a bad effect. It started to purge the Extremis enhancements right out of his system. Imagine being at the top of your game, the most technologically advanced person on the planet, and suddenly you're losing your edge.
Ouch. Talk about a blow to the ego. Because if Tony Stark's good at anything, it's bouncing back, right?
You'd think so, wouldn't you? But this was a dark time for Tony. His tech was failing, his company was falling apart, and then came Dark Reign.
Yeah, so Dark Reign, it hits when Tony's at like his lowest point. And this is when Norman Osborn, the Green Goblin himself, he takes control of SHIELD. It basically turns the whole superhero world on its head.
Wait, slow down. The Green Goblin was in charge of SHIELD. That sounds less like superhero organization and more like evil genius takes over the world. What's Tony doing during all of this?
Well, he was forced into hiding. And not just for, strategy. Remember that Skrull virus that was purging the Extremis from his system? Yeah, it was starting to mess with his mind big time. The excerpts say he could barely think straight. He was even having trouble just saying complex words. No way. Iron Man, the guy who practically invented tech speak, was reduced to struggling for words? That's, I don't know, almost poetic. In a tragic way, I mean.
Yeah, it really shows how reliant he had become on Extremis, This whole time, he's built his identity around being this genius, and then suddenly, it's like that part of him is slipping away. He even has to dig out the very first Iron Man suit, the clunky one he built in that cave, because it's the only one his, fried brain can handle.
Man, talk about a fall from grace. But he pulls through, right? Comes back from all of that?
Eventually, yeah. Pepper Potts, remember her, his, sometimes girlfriend. She plays a big part in this. She exposes Osborn, reveals his attack on Tony to the public, and that kind of shifts things back in Tony's favor. But, yeah, Tony ends up in a vegetative state. His mind is basically on the verge of shutting down completely.
This poor guy, right? Can't catch a break. So what brings him back from the edge this time?
Okay, so get this. Before he slipped into the coma, he had left instructions for what basically amounts to a mind reboot, using a backup of his brain from before the whole Extremis thing.
Hold on, a backup of his brain? What is it, some sci-fi movie?
It was super risky, but his friends, Rhodey, War Machine, and Captain America, they decided to try it.
It's kind of heartwarming,
Yeah.
Even when he's at his absolute worst, Tony still has people who believe in him. You'd think with all that sarcasm and those walls he puts up, he would push everyone away by then.
That's Tony Stark for you, right? Wants connection, but also terrified of it. But anyway, the mind reboot, it works. But not without a few, let's call them side effects.
Side effects? What are we talking? Did he forget how to build a suit?
Way worse. Try processing years of life he missed. The Civil War, the Skrull invasion, Osborn's reign. Imagine waking up and the entire world has changed, everyone's moved on, and you're stuck playing catch-up. That's Tony's reality.
Wow. So how does he deal with all that? Does he just slap on a new suit and get back to work?
Pretty much, yeah. He helped take down Osborn during the Siege of Asgard. Huge battle, basically ends Dark Reign. It's a turning point for Tony, a chance to rebuild, redefine himself.
Okay, so what does Tony 2.0 look like? What's he all about now?
Well, he launches this company, Stark Resilient, focused on clean energy, he's trying to make it for his past, build a better future, but it's Tony Stark, so,
Never that easy. Let me guess. More self-sabotage.
Ding, ding, ding. The trauma, the guilt, it all catches up. He falls back into alcoholism during Fear itself, which was this period where Earth's under attack by, get this, a god of fear. He even fakes War Machine's death, steps down as Iron Man, starts pulling strings from the shadows.
Sounds like he just can't escape his own demons, no matter how hard he tries or how much tech he throws at the problem.
It's this vicious cycle, right? And this is where the story takes a turn. Remember 451, the alien robot? The whole genetically engineered brother thing? Turns out that was a cover story.
Hold up, what? So, no alien robot after all. Was Tony's whole childhood a lie?
Not entirely, it's complicated. Arno, the brother, he was real, just very sick, hidden away for his own safety. 451 hadn't created Tony, but it did create Arno and was obsessed with his potential. So yeah, Tony's adoption was like this elaborate decoy to keep Arno safe.
Wow. This whole time, Tony thinks he's adopted for one reason, but it's something else entirely. That's gotta rock your world, especially when you're already questioning everything about yourself.
And it leads to a major shift. Tony, he reconnects with Arno, who's been isolated for decades. He sees this as a chance, right? Use Arno's genius, plus all the knowledge locked away in 451's database, and actually make a difference in the world.
So, happy family reunion. Brotherly love conquers all.
Come on now, this is Tony Stark we're talking about. It's never that simple.
Okay, so we've got Tony back with his long-lost bro, Arno. Two geniuses, right? You'd think they'd team up, solve all the world's problems, but something tells me it's not going to be that easy.
You know Tony's story too well. Remember that whole inversion spell thing we talked about? The one that flipped good and evil, like, upside down? Turns out Tony, he was affected by it. But he kind of shielded himself from being flipped back.
Wait, what? So he's like walking around with his morals reversed? How does that even work for Iron Man? Did he go full supervillain?
Not exactly. More like he got it in his head that he knew what was best for everyone, that humanity needed him to, like, guide them, even if it meant taking away their free will. It was wild. The excerpts talk about him going kind of power crazy, like he infected San Francisco with this new extremist thing, so he was upgrading humanity.
Yeah, the road to hell is paved with good intentions, right? And Tony has always had that control issue.
Yeah.
But this sounds next level.
Oh yeah, it was bad. Led to this huge showdown with Captain Marvel. She saw what he was doing, this whole forced evolution thing, and was like, nope. It was this big clash of ideals, a battle for what it really means to be a hero.
Okay, so what happened? Did Tony snap out of it? Did Captain Marvel take him down?
It was a whole thing. But yeah, Captain Marvel, she eventually wins. Tony ends up in a coma again. But not before he sets some stuff in motion that'll have, like, lasting consequences.
Another coma.
Yeah.
Seriously. This guy and consciousness are, like, not on speaking terms. What happens while he's out this time?
Two major things. First, Victor Von Doom, Dr. Doom, tries to be a hero, like, actually takes up the Iron Man mantle.
Hold up, Dr. Doom is Iron Man. That's gotta be either the best idea ever or the worst.
Let's just say it's complicated. But it shows that Tony, even when he's out of commission, his actions, everything he does, it has ripples. Anyway, second thing. Young genius named Riri Williams enters the picture.
Riri Williams. Okay, that name sounds familiar.
Right. So Tony was mentoring her before the whole inversion mess. And guess what? She becomes a new kind of Iron Man, using her own skills in tech, like passing the torch, showing that even when Tony stumbles, his whole thing, the belief in humanity, in a better future, it lives on.
All right, so we've got Tony in a coma, Dr. Doom playing hero, and a new Iron Man on the scene. What happens next? Does Tony ever wake up?
He does, eventually. But the process they used to revive him, it rebuilt his body, like cell by cell. The excerpts say it really messed with his head. Imagine that, being put back together, literally. You'd start to wonder what makes you you, right?
No kidding.
Mm-hmm.
Talk about an existential crisis. Am I even real?
And Tony leans all the way in, gets obsessed with this idea that he's a copy, a simulation, not the real Tony Stark. Isolates himself, loses himself in his work, trying to prove he's authentic.
It's kind of heartbreaking.
Mm-hmm.
You know, this guy builds these incredible machines to protect himself, to control the world, and the one thing he can't control is his own mind.
Exactly, and it takes a toll. He pushes everyone away, convinced he's not worthy of love, not even really him.
So how does he break out of that? Does he ever find peace with who he is?
It's a process, but yeah. He starts to heal, reconnects with people, rekindles some old flames. He even finds love again with Janet Van Dyne, the Wasp.
Okay, that's good to hear. Some stability for Tony Stark, finally.
For a while, but this is Tony Stark. Peace and quiet don't last forever.
Of course not. What happens now?
So, he rebrands his company, calls it Stark Unlimited, focuses on this cutting-edge tech, pushing boundaries. He rejoins the Avengers, ready to face whatever's next. He's in a good place, right? At peace with his past.
This is actually starting to sound
Dare I say it?
happy.
Don't get too attached. Remember that deep-seated fear we talked about? That maybe he's not really human? It comes roaring back. This time, fueled by a rogue AI.
Ah, the classic AI gone bad trope. Every tech hero's gonna have that fight.
This AI, it's not just about ruling the world. It wants to break Tony. Prove he's nothing but a machine. And it almost works. Tony gets trapped in this virtual world, brainwashed the whole 9 yards. He even falls off the wagon, the alcoholism. Those demons come back stronger than ever.
So he's back in the thick of it, fighting his own mind. but he gets out right. He always does.
He gets out of the virtual world, yeah. But the damage is done, you know? The doubts are still there. And then Arno, his brother, delivers the final blow.
Arno, what do you do?
So remember how Tony was brought back from that coma, that bio-restructuring pod? Turns out Arno built it. And because it's his tech, he claims he owns Tony.
Whoa, hold on. His own brother thinks he owns him. That's intense. Even for a Stark.
It was Arno's way of trying to, control everything, shape the world in his image. He even builds his own Iron Man suit, becomes this twisted reflection of Tony, a what-if version.
So brother versus brother, fighting for the fate of, well, everything.
It's a battle for Tony's soul, for the future he's trying so hard to build. And in the end, Tony wins, but not with, brute force. He reaches out to Arno, appeals to the good in him, reminds him that there's another way.
So, happy ending, reconciliation, forgiveness, all that good stuff.
Not exactly. Arno's mind, it's gone, lost in this fantasy world of his own making. So Tony does what he can. He creates a virtual world for Arno, a place where he can be the hero he always wanted to be. It's bittersweet, you know? But maybe the kindest thing Tony could do.
A reminder that even with all his genius, Tony can't save everyone. Sometimes the best you can do is offer comfort, a way to escape the pain.
And through that, Tony, he finds a new kind of peace. He accepts that he can't control everything, that some battles can't be won with just tech.
So where does that leave Iron Man? What's the big takeaway after this wild ride through Tony Stark's life?
That even with all the flaws, all the mistakes, all the struggles, Tony Stark, he's a hero. He shows how resilient people can be, the power of hope and that belief that deep down we can always be better, even when we're facing our darkest selves.
And sometimes it's the battles we fight within that make us who we are. Man, that was a deep dive.
No kidding. Tony Stark, he reminds us that even under that Iron Man armor, there's a human heart beating away, fighting for a better tomorrow.
And on that note, we're wrapping up our deep dive into the world of Iron Man. Hope you enjoyed this journey into the man behind the mask. And maybe you even learned a thing or two about tech, humanity, and that crazy thing called hope. See you next time.